I would say somewhere between the first and the second month. This is very precious to watch a little child in these initial stages when they finally begin to actually know that you are the head and that they are completely under your control to the absolute nth degree. Now, as we look at this consent, let's go through the other relationships as well. I think this will help us understand it. In an interview with an employee, I would say that within 1 hour of one interview, I should know whether that employee is going to submit or whether he doesn't. If he doesn't submit, should I hire him? No. If I were interviewing people to sing in a choir, what do you suppose the most one important criteria should be? Not knowledge of music. Will they submit or will they not? If they will not, I don't care how well they sing. Forget them. In other words, the criteria that we want here is, will a person consent to the 5 S's or will he not? If he will not, forget it. In other words, do not go one step further, because every bit of time beyond that point is not only wasted, it will end up in some type of rebellion. And even though you hire them, within the first 6 months you're going to have to terminate them anyway. You say, is it that critical? Yes, rebellion is that critical. If a person is rebellious, it's impossible to set up a working relationship with them. All right, after I have secured consent and the female role has consented, I have no relationship yet. This is the very important step. I have to, in the male role, accept the consent. Now, this is where I think a lot of teenage girls get in trouble with boys. He secures consent. She consents. And has he accepted consent? No, and when she's pregnant, he joins the Navy, and that proves he never accepted any consent. In other words, what does accept consent mean? I've accepted the total package. Even if her parents were neurotic and they made her neurotic, I've accepted what? All the neurosis. She's got diseases. What have I accepted? She's a kleptomaniac. What have I accepted? I want you to know I've accepted an entire package, whatever it might be. And by the way, you should select properly, because now you've selected for life this package of problems. And if you select too much problems, you won't be doing anything the rest of your life but solving problems. What should a female role do real quick if the male role doesn't accept her consent? The minute he has secured consent, she has given consent. If he doesn't accept consent, does she have a man? No resemblance of a man. This is the kind of a guy who's going around to get what he can get, where he can get it, free. Boy, this causes trouble. This is the very opposite of everything we're describing tonight. I think there's some easy ways for a girl to find out. In other words, if the girl actually, out of her savings account, pays for most of the courtship, you know, the polite way, they're at the restaurant and the bill comes and looks, and she knows. So she has the napkin here, and she takes out her $10 bill, and she puts it underneath the napkin, and she looks, and she slides the napkin, and he looks, and he picks up the napkin, he picks the $10 bill up, then he acts like a man again. Just the length of time it takes to get up from the table, walk to the cashier, and pay the $10. Now where is he again? Back where he was. I saw this once in a restaurant. That's why I'm describing an actual situation. He had a complete character change when he put his hand on the napkin. Up until the time he paid. Oh, I mean, he had every resemblance of a man. After he paid, he went back to the same sloppy character he was before she slipped him the $10. What should that girl do? She needs a new man. By the way, how many dates does it take for her to learn this? One on this one. Because always remember, the male shows love by accepting responsibility, and if he doesn't accept responsibility, then I would look somewhere else to try to find out where the love is. When a man will not accept responsibility, there's no love. What if he says, I love you? I'm sure this guy that got the $10 on the napkin I can just imagine the comments that he would make in a parked car that night in the moonlight. You suppose he would really say that he loved her? Yes, he would, and probably he'd go overboard with a lot of words. Well, he'd have to. Why? Why does somebody always really lay it on thick? Well, he's not so sure himself, and she's not so sure, and the whole mess is all mixed up, and so he's going to convince everybody by a lot of talk. Actions always speak louder than words. By the way, though, if you got the actions, the words are wonderful. But the words are the cheapest thing on earth without the actions. By the way, this accepting consent, we got words for it. One is hire. In other words, when I hire you, I've consented. I've accepted your consent. Well, all the way down the line, we have words. It's interesting to know when a child is born into your home, that does not make the consent. Nor does that make the acceptance. Do you see what I mean? In other words, these relationships exist apart from role relationship in contest. In other words, I have to have that child actually consent. And normally, if I were you, I would have it done within the first year of that child's life. And also, should you accept it? Now, you can accept it, there's many ways, but however you do it, what kind of a feeling does it give the child? Here's my life. Do your children tonight know that your life's laid right down? If they don't, they're going to fight you. But can you fight somebody who's already died for you? Just in your mind, think for a moment, how can I have a contest with somebody who's already died? You don't fight. And you should let the children know, I have accepted your consent, which means I now take full responsibility for you. And this is interesting. You can't take full responsibility for somebody if they're still rebellious. Did you know that? When I go to the doctor's office, can he accept full responsibility of my case if I won't take the pills? He says it should be surgery in 12 hours, and I say, forget it. You doctors are all alike. You're just cutting out all these good organs every day so you can get rich and buy all these boats and stuff. I know all about you. He can't help me. 15 hours later, I dropped dead. I died of rebellion. And appendicitis both at the same time. But it was actually rebellion that killed me. So can you see then that the consenting and the accepting of consent are both necessary before I can do anything productive? Now, the average marriage in the United States is a contest from the beginning to the end. Therefore, will there be anything productive in that marriage? You say, well, sure, there's going to be something productive. They had a baby, didn't they? Wait a minute. Is having a child productive? When he grows up to go on welfare and then to end up being committed, fed through the veins for 20 years with taxpayers' money, would you call that productive? Is it possible for a child to come into the world and be non-productive? Therefore, we say in a marriage, if there's not role relationship, you have a good chance of having absolutely a situation with nothing productive in 50 years of marriage. In other words, do we have a relationship if the female has consented and the male has not accepted? No. This might be good advice for your daughters to let them know, do they have a relationship that is binding until the male role has accepted their consent? No. When I go to work, do I want the actual employer to accept my consent? Yes. If he doesn't, I have no relationship. Back to the salesman. When I consent, I have to have the salesman accept my consent to make it a binding relationship. Now, if I go ahead and buy the article and I go ahead and give the money and the particular product doesn't work, and if he hasn't accepted my consent, where am I? Oh, I consented because I did what? I gave him my money. Then I find out later that the product is worthless. And I can't find him. Is he as bad as the guy that's in the Navy? In other words, we say then, do I have a relationship with a salesman? No, because he did not accept my consent. Therefore, is it crucial that the female role know that her consent has been accepted? Or would she go ahead acting as if there were a relationship when there is no relationship? Now, if she acts as if there were, when there isn't, does she get hurt? Absolutely, because if he has not accepted her consent, does he have responsibility? No, he does not feel he has responsibility. Although we have laws, and we have ethics, and we have morals that try to instill that the responsibility is there, whether he feels it or not, but the point is he doesn't feel it. So if he's going to assume the responsibility, does he have to be forced to do it? I'll tell you, a guy's not worth much to fulfill his role of responsibility when he's forced to do it. Responsibility has to be something that flows willfully, and we can also define this because responsibility in the male role is the same thing as love. Whereas there is no difference between the word responsibility and the word love in the male role. Now, can I force someone to love? No, therefore can I force someone to be responsible? No, I might make him pay so much money every month. But that's just about as far as I can go. And when we talk about responsibility, we never limit it to the material. That is only a fraction of what we mean by responsibility. There's a scripture verse that says, "He that does not provide for his own household is worse than an infidel." And several people have thought that that means bread and butter. No, provide means what? Every single need that would arise in that household, be it physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, psychological, whatever you want to call it. He has a total responsibility for every need of everybody underneath him. Christians and Christianity get mixed up in this point. They think that if they consent, that there is actually a relationship that they have with God. No. What has to take place? God has to consent. And then you have a binding relationship. It's the same thing we have in our American law with contracts. Do we have a contract if only one person offers? No. In other words, to have a binding contract, we have to have an acceptance. This is a legal term. We call it acceptance. Well, this is exactly what we're talking about here. There's an acceptance of the consent. Now, after I have an acceptance of the consent, then am I in a binding process? Right. Then I have a role relationship because I have responsibility on one side and I have submission on the other side. And by the way, just the fact that I say those words, isn't it beautiful? The minute I put responsibility and submission together, I've got heaven. That's all it takes, because submission is the female's way to love and responsibility is the male's way to love. And what do I do when I put the responsibility and submission together? I have love that fits. Another way to say love that fits is to say working love. And I think love is beautiful when it's workable. And this is the kind of love that is a working kind of love. Number 13. Obviously, when the female consents, there's a positive aura. Would she consent if there were not? No. By the way, that's what cultivation does. It cultivates a positive aura, which makes it an environment such as she thinks it's nice to submit. So she has now submitted, and immediately after she submits, is she expectant? Yes, she's expectant of all those things that you told her she was going to have. In other words, if you give me all those tokens, now I've submitted, let me have it. In other words, I want the whole thing. So she's looking forward. Now, the next thing that this man has to do is build a relationship. And I'm going to call this the 7 A's, the positive aura, or I could call it oil. The oil of human relations, which is love, which reduces friction to nothing. So there is no friction in the relationship. Therefore, do I have any resistance? No, and the absence of resistance means that the 12 R's are not there. Let me read the 12 R's. Number 1, rights. Would she have any rights whatsoever? No. And don't let this scare you. I know in our society you think rights are sacred, and we've fought for them, we've died for them, we've bled for them, and we're not going to give them up just quick. But really, do you need a single right if you're taken care of perfectly? The only reason the female role in all the different relationships has drummed up their rights is because the male role let them down. The unions today have their rights because management made a mess of things. A woman today has her rights in our society because her husband failed. We have a Bill of Rights in our government because we had governments on the continent of Europe that failed. Every time you see the word right, you have an indictment against the male role that he has failed. So we say then, if I have a successful male role, do I have rights in the female role? Absolutely not. All right, if there are no rights, are there any reservations? No, how could she have any reservations? She just submitted everything that she has or ever hopes to be. Would she reprove him in any way or revolt or want any revenge, any rebellion? No. Now, if the oil of the positive aura has eliminated all the friction, could there be any resistance? No. So we say there's no resistance. Now, could there be any regret? No, she wouldn't want anything any other way than what it already is. Would there be any restraint on her part of anything he does? No. Now, here's a word that bothers a lot of people. Would there be any resentment? No. And let's take the word risk. Now, risk normally means that we're going to be subject to a loss, aren't we? Could she have risk in her vocabulary? Can you begin to visualize that we're describing heaven? I mean, where else can you go without risk? No. Have you ever heard of My Blue Heaven? There is supposed to be a way to have heaven on earth. And the only way to have heaven on earth is a male-female role relationship. And she has given up the 12 R's. By the way, the minute you submit, do you give them up automatically? Now, to make sure that she keeps giving up the 12 R's, and by the way, this keep giving up is beautiful because every morning when she awakes, she's got new rights. Did you know that? You want to know where they come from? I wished I knew. Every morning when I wake up, somehow, some way, I've got new rights on God. I don't know where they come from, but every morning I do what with them? Give them up. I think surely all the rights that I possibly could have ever had are gone by now. But what will happen again tomorrow morning? I have some new ones. In fact, I got a new hobby. I search for all my rights, and whenever I find them, I kill them. It's the only way I can be happy. And if I do not continue this process, the rights begin to build up. And before long, do I have a cause? And before long, has my cause been violated, and is there an injustice? And before long, I'm in warfare. And by the way, I would like to define tonight what I mean by any one of the 12 R's. The minute you have these 12 R's anywhere in your entire organism, you are pretending, be it ever so slight, that you are God. I want you to feel the full weight of that. In other words, it means what? I'm going to take over now. I'm going to do something about this situation. And by the way, the minute I pretend or act as if I am God, do I have tension? Oh, then I suffer. You pay a price for playing God. The only time I have ever heard of anybody who played God and got away with it was this time I was visiting on a tour this mental institution. I was on the second floor, and we were walking down this corridor and into this room, all these beds. There was a gentleman there sitting up in the bed on his knees with a pillow conked on the top of his head. And I don't know what caused me to do this, but I turned and I asked him, I said, "Who do you think you are?" And he squared off his shoulders, and with such dignity as I had never seen, he said, "I am Napoleon." So I kind of laughed a little bit because it was a little amusing. So I said, "Who told you so?" Same dignity, same squaring off the shoulders. He said, "God told me." Then my attention was drawn to the bed next to his, and there was a man there who was tangled up in the sheets, and he couldn't get his head out. And he was frantically trying to get his head out of the sheets. So I turned around and looked at him to find out why he couldn't get his head out of the sheets, and finally he got his head out. And the first thing he said was, "I did not." All right, now, the positive aura that we're describing this evening is an atmosphere of perfect freedom for the female role. She doesn't have any guilt feelings, any negative feelings. She has perfect freedom. The best way I think to describe this was Hannah Whitehall Smith was interviewed in London. And she's one of the famous people that have lived on this earth. Her book has sold several million copies. It's called The Christian's Secret of a Happy Life. The reporters were interviewing her in London, and they asked her this question: "What's your philosophy on life?" And her reply was, "Let the children be happy." And I think when you really understand role relationship, you know exactly what she meant. In other words, this is what the male is supposed to do: set up such an environment that the female role can truly be happy. I mean, I have got to know exactly how that female role feels every moment, how this is affecting her, how that's affecting her, what's going wrong now, because I cannot for one moment let that relationship dip into a negative syndrome. Because if that relationship goes into a negative syndrome, am I in trouble? Or you know it. In other words, can she pull a judge rule on me? Can she strip me of my positional authority? Now, am I still going to pay with my full responsibility, with no authority to do anything? Now, do you want that to happen to you? In other words, here she is in a contest against me. I have no more positional authority because she's pulled a judge role. I'm paying the bills till they're coming out my ears. There's no way I can control anything. Are you beginning to see the disadvantages of letting this relationship go negative? Right now, how important is it that you make sure that that relationship stays in a positive aura? Well, I would say if I were in a male role and I was in a situation, I would do almost anything to keep something from going negative. For example, this past week I had a situation in a certain company. I had every ingredient for something to go negative. In other words, I knew I was going to have a meeting. I looked at my schedule and the week was full. Now, what happens if you got the ingredients of a negative syndrome on Monday and you don't do a thing about it till Saturday? Well, by Saturday you might as well forget it. In other words, things could have evolved and set into blocks till we had no way to solve it. So what do I have to do now? I check the schedule, and by the way, do I start canceling things and moving schedules around? And believe it or not, I had a meeting within 6 hours. The thing never went into a negative syndrome at all. Still in a positive aura and doing beautiful. Now, is it important then in the male role that you stay close to the pulse of something, and the minute you feel it start to move slightly negative, do you drop everything and rush in there and pull it out? You cannot tolerate a single organization to go negative. Now, every hour that any type of an organization that you're in charge of is in the negative situation, you are doing something to their minds. You're putting memories in there. Now watch, it might be just a little bit, and then you might pull it out. And then next week you might go in just a little bit and you pull it out. And then when the big brawl comes, what do they talk about? 3 weeks ago, 1 hour. 2 weeks ago, 1 hour. And in their minds, what do they think? Were you ever in a positive aura? No. Now, do you see the value then of making sure what? The organization at all times is always positive. All right, now, there's one more thing I would say about the positive aura. How high up in the positive aura do you want to be? Very top. Now, here's the reason. If you're in the very top and you hit a catastrophe and you drop 3 notches, where are you? Still in the positive aura. And by the way, you've got something to work with to put the thing back together again because they're reasonable, aren't they? What if you're just above the rational line? And there it breaks. Tranquilizers is the only solution I know. And it's interesting to note, too, in the negative syndrome, it's possible for me to pull this thing out. Will I have to maybe begin to maneuver a little bit coercive? All right, now, will this produce ill will? And you don't do very much of this till, will there be anything you can salvage in the relationship? especially in a boss-employee relationship, you just normally write it off. Or with a salesman-customer, you just say, well, I better get me a new prospect. Now, if I maintain a positive aura in the very top of the actual affectional field diagram, an interesting thing happens. We say that the male role has performed an act of love. Number 14 is called act of love. And I want you to notice carefully, it's singular. One act, not acts of love, but act of love. And the best way to describe an act of love is death. And you can see, obviously, when I die, I can only die once. So therefore, act of love can only be a one-time thing. Let's explain it. God wanted to show the world that He loved the world. He could have sent angels down to tell us, but He didn't because we wouldn't believe Him. He could have Himself told us, and we wouldn't have believed it, because you don't believe words. The man tells his wife, I love you, I love you, I love you. After 3,000 times, she says, would you please keep quiet? I've had enough words for a lifetime. In other words, we say that there is a slight rebellion here against words. What does she want if she doesn't want words? Actions. All right, now let's see what God did to solve the problem. What action do you suppose He could perform to make the world think that He loved them? Only one. Death. So what we're describing here in step 14 is empathy. Now I know I read some articles, the latest thing out in the field of interpersonal relationships, and it says empathy is impossible. And I'll tell you why. Logically, it would appear that way. Empathy means that I put myself into your shoes and see things from your point of view without any ulterior motive. Is that impossible? For me to still be alive, it is. In other words, the only way I can have true empathy is when I personally die. Because if I'm still alive, and let's say only one tiny motive of me is still alive, and I get into your shoes, do I have empathy? No, because what am I after when I'm in your shoes? My one motive. So what I'm describing here tonight as true empathy means that the male role, when he reaches step number 14, dies. I think you're beginning to find why we have few men around. In other words, he gives up everything that is him, and this act of death, and by the way, I have another word for it that might help explain it, abandonment. He has total abandonment of his own role. Now let's use Jesus Christ as an illustration. Was there total abandonment of his own role? In the illustration that we're following, yes. In other words, he abandoned his position, and did he go into our role completely? All right, he became a man completely, and then he, in this position, he died. Now, when somebody dies, you really believe they love you. Because when they die, they have given up everything that they could have done for themselves. An illustration to show you what I mean of real love. If you need a story to help you know that the Creator is capable of love, this story will do it for you. The man was walking along in the forest after a forest fire had just charred everything. And as he's walking along in the forest, he hears a little chirping noise. And he thinks the first thought, I'm imagining, because there was no life. I mean, everything was just completely destroyed in the whole forest.